Takes us to the agenda and the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve both.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Takes us to recognitions.
All right, good evening, everyone. Tonight we will be recognizing our boys swim and dive for their season and our state qualifiers. So if I could invite Coach Julie Riley up to the stand, she will talk a little bit about their season.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me? Thank you for inviting us tonight. Unfortunately, I think the swim team may be at the lecture hall. I don't know. I got a few here, but that's where we went last year. So I'm getting texts saying, no, we're at the new building. So hopefully, but I want to say it's been a great year this year for swim and dive. All these young men were a blast to coach. These athletes worked very hard. They combined, they broke 7 school records, some that had been there a while. Sophomore Hayden Harshman broke the individual 200 free and the 200 IM. Junior Asa Kime and senior Colin Hansel broke the diving records that's been there for a long time. With the help of Landon Gilbert, Mason Inlow, Gage Wright, Hayden Harshman, Asa Kime, and Matt Ditzler, they broke all 3 school relay records. On top of that, this year, they got more qualifying state times, a lot of them for the first time. And they got more state qualifying times as a individual. So not only the relays, but individual qualifying times. It was especially a great year for the divers. All 3 of my divers finished at state in the top 10. Sophomore Gage Wright, which I'll go ahead and have you come up, Gage, if you want to come up. He got 3rd in state. Colin Hansel got 5th at state. And I have a newcomer, junior Asa Kime, was 10th at state. While at state, Drury University came up to me and told me he wanted all 3 of my divers. I said, well, he was going to have to wait a while because 2 are coming back next year, but he snatched up Colin Hansel. I don't know that he got here, who will sign for Drury and dive for them next year. So that's exciting. Drury also told me that everyone was saying on all the competition pools and at both Class 1, Class 2 state, that Grain Valley had the best dive team they've ever seen, and of the state this year. All of these wonderful young men were amazing to coach and to watch them perform in their sport. And if you did not get out and see boys swim and dive this year, you missed the best show in town. Thank you for honoring these young men. They so deserve it. If swim and dive want to come on up, Gage is the one that got 3rd in state this year. And in his diving, and unfortunately, this is called swim. That's yours. This is called swim and dive. So the divers also had to swim because the swim team is so small. So Mason, I think yours was right here on top here. Mason, Hayden, Matt, Morgan. All right, and Landon, and let's see, and Colin. All right. Just pass. Once you have okay. The rest may be at the lecture hall because they said they were coming tonight. So anyway, that's the swim and dive team.
Congratulations, everybody.
So that takes us to patron comments. Any school district patron may present information to the board at this time. Presentations will be limited to no more than 5 minutes. The board will not take any action on issues not included on the published agenda. However, all comments will be taken into consideration. Patrons are requested not to discuss individual faculty, staff, or students. Patrons are reminded that this is a public forum and comments relative to individuals could result in litigation. However, any patron may request to meet with the board in executive session. No response will be given by the board at this time. Nobody signed up, but is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the board? Okay. Takes us to reports.
First up tonight, we are going to do a progress update on the Phase 6 project, Fieldhouse project at Grain Valley High School. And we're pleased to have with us Ben Vandrew and Spencer Brown with Newkirk Novak. Gentlemen, come on up and give us, I guess, basically a 6-month update, right? Yeah. All right. It's all yours.
So yeah, we've had really good progress so far. We've hit some major milestones the last couple weeks. We got the roof on the gym. We've got the slab on grade poured in the gym. We've got some major milestones coming up here these next couple weeks. We've got slab on grade, both in the weight room and roof, both in weight room and Eagle Way, which is kind of the blue and yellow areas you see there on screen. So if we can get kind of basically 100% dried in before Christmas, before really the winter months hit, that's huge for our schedule. Kind of want to highlight a trade partner that's been doing a really good job for us, and that's Hike Camp Masonry. They've done all the block walls, and they've had, you know, up to 3 crews on site working in multiple areas at once. So they've really helped us push the schedule to kind of get us where we're at right now. Kind of looking the next 5 weeks. So we've got all of our overhead roughing going on right now in the gym. Once we pour the slabs in the weight room in Eagle Way, we'll start overhead roughing here in the next couple weeks there. And then here probably by the end of the month, we'll start exterior skin on the building. So you'll see all the fancy blue block, brick, and everything start going on by probably end of the month.
Maybe give them just weight room, when we would move weights potentially.
Yeah, so kind of all areas right now are tracking probably 2 weeks ahead of schedule. We're looking mid-April for the weight room, and then kind of beginning of August for Eagle Way and the gym.
So really, things are going really well out there. There's been a lot of coordination with district staff. Obviously, it's a complicated site, but I think we've gotten things figured out with the team, and, you know, just really good progress, fun progress. We had some wrestlers out there taking photos for their picture by some construction equipment, so it's been a fun project so far.
Will the weather not play much of a factor at this point, but with where you're at in it, or do you feel like, I mean, there's still potential for some slowdown because of weather?
There is a little bit maybe in the next 2 weeks, but once we get roof on, really our critical path turns to the inside of the building and all the overhead MEP install. So there may be some weather days getting skin on, but really critical path is on the inside of the building. So
Good thing is that it doesn't look like it's going to be too bad for the next
yeah,
couple weeks,
it's
which is nice,
been pretty good for us so far. We've had a couple weeks of, you know, rain and snow, but
Sure.
for the most part, weather's been good to us.
Yeah, it
Knock
has.
on wood.
Any other questions? Thanks, guys.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Next up is the tax levy ballot issue.
Yes, consistent with our 5-year strategic plan and this year's annual priority, we are bringing to the board a recommendation for a ballot measure for the April 2024 ballot for a 65-cent levy increase. It would be a net increase for the taxpayer of 25 cents. And we have invited our representatives from LJ Hart and Company to come and help us answer questions and really kind of lay out the case. Because given the fact that we want to increase our operating levy by 65 cents, we're hoping to maximize the value for the taxpayer by also committing to reducing our debt service levy by 40 cents. And that kind of a move, although I think will be appreciated by the taxpayer, We just have a responsibility to make sure that we can fulfill our obligations that have already been incurred, and since we continue to have facility needs and borrowing needs in the future, we want to make sure that it doesn't tie our hands, that we couldn't, for example, go back and continue to issue bonds to build another building or to do what other kind of work we need to do for too long a period of time. So we've asked Tom Pizarkowitz and Wesley Townsend to take a look at the numbers for us, and they're here to give that presentation and to help answer any questions as the board prepares to come back in January. This would not be an action item tonight, but it would be an action item sometime in January. So, Tom, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Welly. Since that was a perfect setup for me, we'll just go ahead and jump into the presentation here. And certainly, if you have any questions as I go through this, please interrupt. So, Nick, are you driving? Okay. If we go to, you've seen this slide before, but the history of financings with your district. I really want to focus on the savings from refinancings since 2011, almost $5.4 million. This past September, the board approved a prepayment of $3 million on your 2019 bonds. And so total savings over the years in the paragraph on the left-hand side is just over $5.8 million. And the reason why that's important is because that really helps set the foundation for the options that we're going to be talking about tonight. Not only no tax rate increase bond issues, but shifting some of that levy, your debt service levy, over to operations if you choose to do so. Next, I'm going to get into your historical levies by fund dating back to 2011-12. Some of this may be review, but the district has 4 funds to work with. You have the incidental fund used for day-to-day operating expenses, the teacher's fund for salaries and benefits, the debt service fund, which can only be used to repay your general obligation bonds, your capital projects fund for facility improvements. Now you notice you don't have a levy over there, but you can move money from the incidental fund over to capital projects for that purpose. And then your total tax levy on the far right-hand side. So this fiscal year, your total tax levy is 4.4882. Going back to 2011-12 is 1.55656. So you've rolled back $1.08 over those years, and mainly due to growth in assessed valuation. One idea that we have for tonight is, if you'd ask for a 65-cent levy increase, the incidental fund would go up 65 cents, and I have that highlighted in yellow, but then we drop the debt service fund by 40 cents. As mentioned, a net tax increase of $0.25. Now, I may make reference to just operating levy. That consists of the incidental fund, the teachers, and the capital projects. Those 3 funds together are considered your operating levy. Okay, looking at your debt service fund and the strength of those balances, your current situation, we have the $1.70 levy over there, assuming 2% growth, and we do have $10 million of bonds left to issue. So that's already factored into this scenario here. So in the blue column, we have the revenue by fiscal year. In the red, we have the total fiscal year payments. In the purple column on the right-hand side, we have the projected balance in the debt service account as of June 30th each year. So if you imagine your beginning balance, revenue minus your payments, your ending balance is in the purple column. You can see how your balances are very strong, and they continue to increase with growth and assessed valuation, so much so you have more than 1 year's reserve in balances. So you have enough money to make next year's payment before revenue even comes in. That's a very good position to be in. Okay, so now looking at your bonding capacity on page 6, Won't go through, I don't want to get bogged down in all the details here, but essentially on the left-hand side, we look at your assessed valuation and state assessed, and we take 15% of that. We have to subtract off the principal outstanding on your current bonds. We can add back some cash that you have in the debt service fund, and then we have to subtract off the September interest payment. If you kept your levy at $1.70 in the blue shaded column, looking at, let's say, 2025, April 25, your legal limit would be a $35.8 million. Now, I always like to back off that, so it would be around $34.5 million that you could pursue. If we go with the strategy of reducing the debt service levy by 40 cents, because we won't be generating as much cash, you lose a little bit of bonding capacity. It goes to $33.467 million. And you can track that all the way down, the blue and the green column, how your bonding capacity grows with assessed valuation and paying down your debt. But again, you lose a little bit of capacity with because if we transfer money out. All right, so next I looked at, with $1.70 in debt service, and assuming the April 25 election, going up to nearly your legal limit, $34.5 million. We got the revenue in blue. In red, we got the payments. I assume a 20-year repayment plan on top of your existing debt. And then the balances in the purple column. Again, if you look at those balances, they're above your debt service payments each year, so that's, that you can easily accommodate another bond issue with $1.70. And so that's what's telling us, really, you have some flexibility. And that's what's bringing us to, well, how much, I guess I was tasked with, how much can we pull out of debt service without really hamstringing our future building needs? So on page 8, as mentioned, we lose a little bit of capacity, so a $32.5 million bond issue in 25 with a $1.30 levy. And I note that in the black shaded column when the levy changes to $1.30. Now you look at your balances in the purple column. They actually fall below your payments. You don't have quite 1 year's worth of reserve in the debt service account, but that's manageable. I mean, you can fall below your payments a bit. Your revenue's coming in. What you have in balances plus the revenue coming in, there's enough to meet your payments. I just don't like to see that purple column drop too far below next year's payment. But this is manageable, as mentioned, but I would feel uncomfortable going any lower. And so that's why I feel like 40 cents is probably the max. So if we were to pursue this route, a sample ballot would look as presented on page 9. Essentially, following to the form of the ballot, we have to state the purpose, and we have in here for improving pay and benefits for teachers and other employees. There's some flexibility as to what you put in the ballot when you talk about the use of it. But then you do have to state you increase the operating tax ceiling by 65 cents to the $343.82. And then the second paragraph, we repeat that. We're going up 65 cents beginning in 2024. And then we could say the district expects to make corresponding reductions to its debt service tax levy of 40 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. This would result in an estimated overall tax levy of the district to increase by 25 cents. So you can put that in the ballot. Now, naturally, you have the promotional material, everything, brochures, pamphlets, whatnot, that would all help clarify. But if someone doesn't really know first time going in to vote and they see this, this description does help.
Tom, from a legal ballot question, you mentioned that you have to have the purpose, but all these numbers that are in the actual question, what is your professional opinion about being explicit about the 65 cents, having the 343.82 per 100 assessed valuation? Are both of those values required?
Yes, yeah, I like to have them and both of them in there because I've experienced situations in the past where someone from the state auditor's office not here, but there's been different.
It is a live broadcast. Not
Mixed
that they're watching.
Mixed interpretations on where you set the levy, and so we feel as though stating what the increase is and where we expect it to be is the best approach.
Tells the whole story.
Yes.
Because from a campaign standpoint, what we would want to emphasize for the taxpayer is that their net increase is 25 cents, and for a home valued at $250,000, that would be $119 a year. But with your coaching, we're able to put that in the language. It's just not in the question itself. It's in the content that follows. It happens to be the last line, which makes me a little nervous. Mm-hmm. But I think holistically, this tells the story that we want to tell.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, our goal on the campaign side is to make sure that all of our voters are informed enough ahead of time that nobody is reading this for the first time when they get to the ballot box.
Yes.
Tom, you said that we have to state the purpose. We've stated the purpose in the sample, improving pay and benefits for teachers and other employees. Are we going to be held to that? For example, if we decide to start a police force, that's not increasing pay for current employees. So are we going to run into challenges by adding things with this money that we didn't state here? And I don't know if I said that.
I follow what you're saying. So it essentially becomes one pool of money when you take the 65 cents on top of what you're already collecting. So it's not like in 2024 going forward that you have to clearly identify, okay, this is specifically going to this purpose. It's all one pool of money at that time. And you do have in here and general operating expenses. I mean, that's very broad. Or we can wordsmith it however you want.
Eddie, I think we would clear the legal hurdle, but I think that it might be deceiving our patrons if we're not crystal clear on exactly what we want to use the money for. So I think the ballot language would be okay, but we would really need to make sure we get whatever we want to use this money for actually out there
In the campaign. So the
that
campaign
there's no-
education is going to be a lot more
Yeah,
critical.
I just
than-
want to make sure that we're not misleading people accidentally. So, I think it clears the legal hurdles, but I do think that we would want to make sure that we educate everyone on exactly what we would use this for.
Agreed.
My recommendation would be, at this point, we know that this would generate $3.67 million. That at this point in our planning stage, I'd recommend that we target at least 90% of that towards increasing pay. And that gives us at this point $360-some thousand for us to make some decisions with as we get closer to our budgeting phase. Now, there are some unknowns about our budget for next year, and so if that evolves, so worst case scenarios, if state funding drops significantly next year, which at this point we don't think it will, but it always has that potential, then by the time we are actively campaigning on this levy, we would be campaigning on whatever our new reality is. And so what we would need to do, we'd still need to commit to pay increases, but we'd have to be real that the 90% wasn't going to fly anymore, because we will actually need this levy because the burden of operating our school district will have shifted from the state to the local level. But we'll know that by 6 or 8 weeks out from the election. So it's really, it puts the board in a tricky spot because the board, to get this on the ballot, you have to authorize this and we have to submit this to the county by January 23rd. But we're not going to know where we stand on state revenues until later in the spring. It'll be easier for us to make a more informed projection later in the spring. And so that's why the campaign cannot start in January. The campaign needs to start later once we know more clearly how we're going to be able to devote this new revenue. But that is what we intend to do. I mean, the primary purpose is to improve pay, again, consistent with this year's annual priority, supporting our five-year goal.
Dr. Welly, just clarity, you said 90% of that would go back into staff benefits, things like that, but
That's my thinking today, yes.
Okay. But did you say that would potentially change as we become more state-funded?
I just want to be careful that just because I just said it and said that that's where we are today, that if state funding drops and we need to make up, $1 million shortfall just to maintain the status quo next year, then $1 million of the 3.6 million is going to have to come off the top, and we're going to fail to apply 90% of our new revenue towards salary and benefits. But we'll be transparent along the way, and we'll let our people know, look, as of today, this is what we want to do. And but as our reality evolves, we'll have to roll with it. And we'll just have to be very careful not to make other major commitments of expenses for next year until just our normal budget planning period. School safety is really an important topic for a lot of us, and we'd very much like to be able to add at least one more SRO into our force in our partnership with Grain Valley PD. And I think as a board, we can have more discussion about once we have the safety audit that comes back, and we have that report as soon as early February, then I think that's when we have that talk about, okay, what kind of school safety provisions do we need to be doing? And does it involve the addition of more personnel? And do we want to make that a priority in any new positions that we hire for the next school year? Then that February-March timeframe would be the time we've done it. Now, you've already committed to ballot language at that point. So it does seem a little bit out of order, but that's the way the system is kind of set up for us. Anyway, that's why the language is crafted the way it is right now, because it does emphasize improving pay and benefits. And those benefits are getting more expensive too. So, teachers don't like the sound of that, because we can devote another $600,000 to pay and benefits and not improve anybody's pay, but their benefits got a lot more expensive. So that is part of the package as well. But I think 90% is a good measure right now, but the order of things, again, to reinforce, it seems a little strange. As soon as the public hears that we're putting a measure on the ballot, they're going to expect to know where every penny is going to go, and we're not going to have all those answers until 6 to 8 weeks before the election, which for most campaigns is plenty of time to really effectively get the word out.
Nick, do you know what percentage of our budget now goes directly to personnel costs?
83%.
Yeah, I think it's really important that everyone paying any attention to this is just clear-minded that the 90% that you're hoping for is a hope at this point. I mean, we really need to see where everything comes in, where the safety audit comes in, and see what kind of security upgrades and needs that the district could be looking at. But a question, so what you guys said was reducing the levy from 170 to 130 is the max that you guys would recommend at this time?
Yes, if you want to create the ability or have the ability down the road to pursue another bond issue for our additional facility improvements.
Which I think we all probably believe that that's going to be in the future. It's going to be a need. So So outside of that, if more money is needed to go to security or other needs outside of staff, current staff, it would have to be an additional levy. Instead of 25 cents, it would have to go up. That's where that additional money would have to come from.
Yes. Now, for this spring, it would need to come, if this was the ballot language that the board approves, it's going to have to come out of this 65 cents. So, yeah, so if we, whatever commitments we make to funding safety, if that's going to come off the top, then that's going to come off the top of the $3.6 million.
Right. I was just making that point that this is just for discussion. This could change, so everybody just needs to be thinking kind of fluid with what we want to do with the money.
This is the first conversation, yes, that we are having that has any kind of specificity to it. So this is our starting point. The 90% of the 3.6 million, where that comes from, is based on our target to be in the top half in all of our positions. That is what we estimate the cost to be. Would be that we would need to be a little north of $3 million to do that. So, if that's not to say that we're guaranteed that's what this is going to generate for us for next year, but anything less is going to fall short of our target. But you know, if push comes to shove and we fall a little bit short of our target, but we've still made a great leap forward in what we're doing for pay, I think that'll be our reality, and I think that'll be, you know, if we can all feel good about that situation at that time, if that's where we land.
I have a question. What holds us accountable to doing what we say we were going to do, right? Because like if we're advertising one thing and then we were like, well, guys, we told you things could change, that's really difficult. And when we have so much trust from our community and we are a very, like the school district as a whole is a very positive thing in our community, we do not, I mean, I know the goal is to be transparent and to be educated among all of these things, but then in addition, how do we hold ourselves accountable? What is that process?
I mean, our public holds us accountable. I mean, the trust we hold is real, and if it's broken, it's really hard to get back. So we're motivated by doing our best to do what we said we were going to do.
So just on good faith.
It's on good faith. I mean, that's the ballot language. The language the words we choose for the ballot measure are very important, and then what we do between now and the election day in terms of the calculations and making it feasible and possible, and then what we do afterwards about making good on our commitments, whatever level of pay it is that we campaigned on, whatever new positions we said we were going to hire, whatever the services are good we were going to do for students. We have to do our best, and sometimes we fall a little bit short, or we have to tweak some things, and we just tell our people, like, this is what happened. This is the adjustment we're making, and sometimes that's open for criticism. And generally, if it's within the mark of what we said we were going to do, people understand that things change. So, but if we say this is for competitive pay, no matter what that level is, I just throw out a number 90%, and I kind of explain where that number came from. But if it gets shaved down to 80%, I think technically, though, I mean, we'll campaign on 80% if that's what it ends up being. But the language I'll still feel good about the language in the ballot, because the focus would have still been on teacher pay. If that's hitting your question.
Yeah, that's tricky. If you're going to campaign on something, I think, 83% operating when it's payroll 44 million, 42, 44, 40, somewhere around there. Give or take.
Pay and benefits.
Yeah, pay and benefits of the FTE. So 83%, we'll go with that. So in my mind, I don't see anybody campaigning on the general operating expense. I don't think that's something exciting to give to the public. And I think the focus would absolutely be perceived as this money, or 80%, 90% of this money would go to the employees. it's a fine line to walk. You know, 3.2 million is 7.5% of 44, 8% of 44. And so I would assume, if I was a staff member, that, oh, we're all getting about an 8% increase. And I don't, if that doesn't happen, or when that doesn't happen, let's say it moves to a 5% salary increase, somebody making $60,000 a year is about $1.50 an hour raise. After taxes, that's about $40 a week. And I think that that hype might very quickly go down, that maybe $1.50 an hour raise across the board, and that is a large sum of money across the board. But I think it would be hard to maintain the excitement about $1 or $1.50 an hour increase. 4%, 5%, it is an increase, and it is a step in the right direction. Man, that's a very, very tricky line to walk. And I know it's hard to walk the line because of some of the unknowns. I'd be curious to see if any of the board members would be up for discussion on, or is it even a possibility to add potential wording in the sample ballot for added security measures / personnel? So if the security audit comes back, the funds would be there, but maybe not have to dip into the increased staff pay.
Seems like the issue with that.
If that's a possibility.
Since the security audit won't come back until after the ballot's got to be turned into Jackson County, if we put that kind of thing in the, and that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, if we put that in the ballot language, we're going to be held to that. And we won't even know what we need to do for security until a month after. We'd have to be really careful how you word it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not specifically, but I mean, the board, I wouldn't think, like, we don't report to that third-party audit company for security. Meaning if we all kind of feel that another SRO would be beneficial, or two, or whatever that number is, or added security measures, no matter the findings, would it be beneficial to maybe have the funds there, so that process doesn't prolong, you know?
So I guess my question would be, along those lines, that would be covered under general operating expenses of the district, correct?
It would be. I mean, I could see if you added something like to enhance security, you know, look at improving pay and benefits for teachers and other employees, comma, enhance security measures, comma, and general operating expenses. That's just off the top of my head, so I may have, think that through a little bit more.
Is that getting too specific?
Well, general security or security measure, enhanced security, that
could be
pretty broad.
Yeah.
It could be.
Is 25 cents enough?
Actually, the 65 cents overall for operating levy probably, I mean, if we look at everything we wish we were doing and could do, it's probably half of what we wish we were asking for. If we were really gonna do everything and be everything that we wanted to be. But Mr. Nobles, when he met with our team before and after the survey, the polling survey that his group did, he really reinforced with our leadership team that, the school districts that are passing tax increases, if they're keeping if the impact of the average home, average taxpayer is about $100 a year, those are the levies that are passing. And the ones that are approaching $200 a year on an average home, those are the ones that are not passing. So our 65 cents would have an impact of $119 on a $250,000 home in Grain Valley. So we feel like the 119 we can do. We feel like we can generate the votes on that. We can campaign on that. We wish we were doing $1.30. Another nickel would get us another few $100,000 a year, almost 300,000, or would it be 300,000? But does it start to push that threshold above the $100 per year safety limit? Because whatever we put out, like, we need it to pass. And if we're going to play with the threshold and not pass it, then we're going to be in a worse situation. So yes, we could do another nickel, but every nickel just it increases the revenue. It also increases the risk.
So I think that we can say right now that there are a lot of questions in how this wording is. Our community has asked us to be transparent and to be able to see, after some other things that have occurred within our district, of where things are going. And so then my question for you is, we can talk about this in this room, but what does that look like in educating our public to understand all of these moving parts, what we need, where that money's going, so that we don't have some of the issues we've had before?
I think one of the ways that we prevent a bad situation is in how we word the ballot language. And wherever the emphasis of the money is going to be, I think that's what should be in the ballot language. I think when it comes time to campaign, we can campaign on what we're going to do about safety. Because let's face it, whatever we do, if it has anything to do with safety, we're going to talk about what that is. My concern about putting safety provisions on the actual ballot language is by a percentage of the $3.6 million. It's a small enough percentage that I just want, if this levy is not a safety levy, I'm reluctant to have safety in the language of the levy. I'd rather campaign on it as one of the examples of operationally what we're going to do to improve. And our goal in an information campaign with our community is that everybody who goes in to vote that day, they already know what our issue is, why it's there, what we're going to do with it, and they don't even have to bother reading the ballot language because they just see that it's the Grain Valley School levy issue and they already know how they're going to vote. The person that shows up and is reading this language for the first time, more likely than not, they're not going to vote on it no matter what we put in the language. So it's just really important that the campaign is clear about what we're going to do. And this board has a lot more conversation to have about how you're going to spend your $3.6 million. And we won't even really start that conversation until February. So, but yes, the decision you have about the language is now, and that's why that part of the discussion is now. And I think that your decision about whether or not you include safety in there is fine. I'll give you an example. We have the addition of I think it's reasonable on our current situation that we could add a school resource officer next year. And so let's say that is the thing that we did for safety from an operating expense standpoint. So if I'm just going to throw out a number, let's say that's $65,000. If $65,000 of the $3.6 million new revenue is going to be our safety enhancements, we can campaign on that, and I think that's going to help us out. I think our community is going to really respond well to the fact that we're adding school resource officer. But I'm not sure that it justifies the word safety being in the language itself.
But what if that number went to almost $500,000? Then what? Would that be worth putting it in the language?
If it was $500,000, that is not something. My concern on that today is that we've got about another $3 million worth of things that we could put into the budget next year beyond teacher pay, and an additional SRO is one of the things that goes into that $3 million. So I'd be reluctant to commit $500,000 to one category and not take into consideration special education, Section 504, literacy support, behavior support, any of the things that are going to require maybe an equal amount of investment as what safety will take.
So here's the struggle I have. We're talking about raising people's taxes. It's not a bond issue where there's no increase. We're actually going to require people to give us more money. I have to be comfortable knowing what we're going to do with that money before I can support any real ballot language. So up to now, it's all been salaries, and I can get behind that. But if we're going to use it for anything other than salaries, we have to have that hashed out. I don't think it necessarily has to be in the language. We can keep it so it's legal and educate the public on what we're going to do. But if we don't make up our mind on what we're going to do before we get the money, then it's just a money grab. Then we're just going out and grabbing money and saying, oh, we'll figure out what we want to do with it later. So I'm just really concerned that before I can truly support it, I have to know that, and I don't want to put a number on it like 90%, but I have to know that what we're talking about here primarily is salaries, and we're going to take care of the teachers and other staff members, and then we can worry about the rest as those priorities pop up. But so is this a ballot measure to raise salaries for teachers, or is it something else? I guess is really what I'm asking.
I agree, Jared. That's why I'm saying there's a lot of loopholes and some missing parts that are not clear within this that need to be readdressed.
I think going back to what Tom said earlier, if we leave in here general operating expenses and then the pay and benefits, then it becomes incumbent on us to make sure that our education is right. And I think that because the ballot language is due in a month, basically, the conversations that we're going to have about what else to do with it, the security or whatever, won't even really happen until after this has to be submitted. So maybe this is the more generic and safer way to go, but we really have to know what we're going to teach the public on before we go out to them. And those conversations, again, aren't even going to start until after the language has been submitted. So I think maybe to go back to what you asked, leave it like this. This covers, it allows us to do the security or whatever else we want to do, but it makes it, the point is improving pay and benefits. That's the primary focus.
And when is this gonna come back up for action?
This
Do
would,
we have 2 meetings or 1?
this would be, you would do this in January. You have is it 5th? There's a workshop. 4th or 5th. 4th. January 4th is a workshop, so you could discuss it then. 2 weeks later is your business meeting, and that would be your last chance to take action before it gets turned in by the 23rd of January, which I'd like to turn it in either on the 19th or the 22nd.
Okay. Well, I think we can follow back up at that next workshop and try and hash some more of this out.
Well, and isn't there a spot in our retreat for some of this discussion as well? Or at least we can make a little bit of time for it.
Yeah. Then we'll bring the discussion back in January.
And when was the last time we've asked for a levy increase?
2004 was the last time we asked voters to weigh in on the levy. So it will have been 20 years. That's not really how that should work. And so I think that's another mindset shift that we hope to change moving forward. Is I think because it has been so long, there's kind of this scarcity sort of thinking, and the prospect that we're going to have a levy. That's why I say if we were going to raise taxes to pay for everything that we wish we could do for kids, it would be twice of what we're asking for. And I think people panic when they hear that this isn't going to do everything that we want it to do. Well, that's because we've waited 20 years to do it. And so what I would say is let's do what can be done now. And then in the next handful of years ahead, just know that this is a discussion we can have at any time. That we can, if our reality changes as a community, and we need our community to weigh in on the levy rate again, then we just need to ask them sooner. And we need to not be worried about waiting another 20 years to have them tell us how they want us to serve them.
Tom, in your experience, what's the typical window or waiting period between levies for a school district?
Well, yeah, there's a wide range there, but 20 years is a long time. You know, I would say, 10 years, 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And we are seeing a lot of this activity where we're shifting money from the debt service to operations, because the tax increase, no doubt about it, is difficult. And so many districts are trying to soften the blow and reduce the debt service levy.
Anything else? Carry on.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Takes us to the CSIP annual priorities.
So each year, we like to look at our CSIP and bring that back to the board at least 4 times a year. In the fall, we ironed out our 5 annual priorities. These are the one school year set of benchmarks that we feel like would help move us towards our 5-year goals. This is our 3rd year of the current 5-year plan, and so this is, if you look at this, the way that this update is organized, it has the objective and the priority at the top. So the priority number 1, that's our annual priority. And then we always designate the person who owns this. You know, there's nothing that is, there's no big action that we take that is done by one person, but this is the person that kind of owns the initiative. Then the background section gives you a little bit of history about how we got to where we are. How did we get to the place that we have now set this 1-year goal? And then the measure for 23-24, that we try to, with as much specificity as we can, hit something that is really clear and obvious to a reasonable person of whether or not we did what we said we were going to do this year. And then the funding source is generally general revenue, but once in a while there's some grants that help us fund some of these things. It happens to be a good grant year. The only other thing I'll point out about how the tool is laid out, before I turn it over to Dr. Allen, who is the owner of priority number 1, is where you see the December update language and you see that that's in green. That's just a subtle little indicator about an overall color code measure. Are we on track to meet our year-end goal? So green means we're on track. Yellow means there's some concern about hitting some aspect of the measure. And red would mean, full alert. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Allen and Dr. Gooch, who are going to kind of tag team back and forth and walk us through the update.
So I'm going to comment on the measures, the 4 measures that we have. Essentially, we're looking at literacy at the elementary level specifically this year. And instead of just reading you our update 1 through 4, I'm just going to give a little additional information and then let me know if you have questions. So on number 1, that focus is really implementing a new phonics program for our kindergarten through 2nd grade students called UFly. At this point, we are on track for full implementation. The immediate concern, as you would imagine, that came up are our current 3rd through 5th graders who did not receive this training. Some did through pilot programs and, as we were trying things out last year. But there are some gaps there, so we have our instructional coaches and our classroom teachers and our building administrators working really hard to create kind of supplemental programs for those kids who need it in grades 3 through 5 to sort of catch up. But it's been very well received and is going well this year. Number 2 focuses on the reading success plans, which was a requirement by the state this year. Right now, we have 28.5% of our students in grades 1 through 5 on a reading success plan. There are a lot of criteria for being on a reading success plan, but what I'd want to point out is that doesn't mean that 28.5% of our students cannot read. What that means is it could be anywhere from just monitoring their general instruction in the classroom to small group to one-on-one individual. So that 28.5, that number encapsulates all of those different kinds of monitoring. So basically any student who has a dyslexia diagnosis or has any sort of reading concern whatsoever may be on just a monitor status. Then we may have small group work that's occurring, and then we may have one-on-one instruction that's occurring. So we are monitoring that at each grade level, and we'll be looking for those numbers to continue to drop over the years, of course, at both our implementation of the phonics program and as we work through our new curriculum we have for reading this year. And then on number 3, we were instructed to create a comprehensive literacy plan this year, which we did because it was due in October, but the guidance has not come out from the state yet. So really it's a compilation of what we are currently doing, but there is an extensive, long document that has been teased for this entire school year. The latest was it's coming out in December. It's still not out. We're still waiting. So we will do much more on that particular measure as soon as we have the guidance document. So we'll revisit that one. And then on number 4, we had a large portion of teachers over the last 2 years go through LETRS training. It's a 2-year training. We also had a large group of teachers that went through Orton Gillingham training last summer. And our intention this spring is to send out a survey to look for additional cohorts in order to continue that training for our teachers. I will say that whether they participated in one or the other, it's built a lot of confidence and strength in our reading program at the elementary level. Our ultimate goal would be to try to get everybody through the program, but it's pretty intensive and pretty expensive. So we're doing it kind of through a cohort model just to kind of watch expenses and take on teachers who feel like they're in a place where they're ready to do that level of additional learning throughout the school year.
For the teachers that do that training, you said there's a summer component as well. And is there any sort of stipend or compensation of their time during that, or?
It is. It's not a massive compensation, but we try to give somewhere, depending on which the program is, between $100 or $150 a day for completing the work. The state actually this year for the LETRS training, that would be for the OG training, for the LETRS training, when the teachers complete their work in February, that's like their final exam, we are able to award them $500 for the program, and the state will actually reimburse us this year for that.
Anything else? Nick?
Okay, so I will address priority 2, which is talking about a comprehensive facilities audit. So the reason why you see this down in the December update, it's yellow, and this is based on the enrollment trend data that we gathered in in October. Basically, what this identified for us is the need for us to delay working with our architects until the fall. So this priority will not be fully completed this year. We are moving this facilities audit more towards the future, and we will readdress this again towards the end of the school year in the fall of '24.
All right, moving on to our priority number 3, which has to do with K through 12 behavior. So it's our multi-tiered systems of support for behavior. Again, really focusing on our progress on those 3 measures. On the first measure, as we talked about at the beginning of the year, we used some grant money to try to pilot some different programs to work in teaching of behavioral skills this year. So it's sort of community time at the beginning of the day where they're focusing on a particular lesson that works on either character building or community building. We let each building just sort of have full autonomy and try their own. Our process for evaluating these different programs, because we'd like to build some continuity, at least between grade levels, so, looking at least K5, 6, 8, 9, 12, is going to start between January and February. So essentially everybody gets to pilot this year, and then we're going to create a small ad hoc committee that is going to evaluate each one of the programs by visiting the buildings and talking to the teachers and talking to the students and talking to the administration, and try to make a decision on what's best for a particular grade level. So that'll continue to work throughout the school year. On number 2, we do have every school tracking behavior data, and it looks a little different at each grade level. But I will say K-8 does have at least a monthly or every other month meeting where they are reviewing the data and continuing to update any students who are on Tier 2 or Tier 3 plans. All levels, pre-K through 8, have worked really hard on establishing just Tier 1 instruction on teaching behavior this year. has been a huge focus for every single building. And I think that this particular measure will just continue to grow over time. The high school has purchased a program called eHall Pass. That's been a huge focus for them. Just one of their biggest behavior concerns was passing time or out of class time, and that's solved. A lot of their problems are continually looking at that data and evaluating and pulling up students who they notice are missing excessive amounts of class time, and it's been very effective. So it might look a little different in each building, but it's very much a focus for every building this year. And then the third one really is going to come up in the spring. We send a survey in the spring, specifically just a few questions, like 3 questions on behavior, wanting to know, the efforts we started last year, how were they progressing? And at that point, we had 75% of our teachers that agreed that our new systems of support for behavior were having a positive impact. And so, last year's data was around 60%. We're shooting for 75% this year. So we'll send those same questions out this spring, and hopefully we'll see that increase that we're looking for, and that continues to increase year over year.
I have a question on that. So if my memory serves me correct, on our student data that we had received, I can't remember if it was students regulating themselves or others or conflict resolution. There was one that was out of whack with the others. I think it was some sort of regulation of behavior in some ways. And so obviously if we are teaching behaviors and we are going through these things and we have systems in place, hopefully that data from that same, because I think that's the survey that students took and parents took and teachers took, all those things.
Yes.
That would have an impact on that as well. Do you remember which one I'm talking about? I can't remember.
Conflict resolution was a big one, and then another one was, I think, something around like I can be okay when I'm angry, or it's a dysregulation.
Yes.
So our climate and culture survey, as you know, is complete for the year. So part of this ad hoc committee is also going to be looking at the results of those. It's really going to compare fall last year to fall this year. We are required to do that survey in the fall. So what I feel like we're going to see even more impact next fall on the student side, because if we just started teaching these behaviors in September and then at the end of the October we give climate and culture, I don't know that we're going to grow leaps and bounds there, but I would say by next year that would be the expectation. But we will compare last year to this year too.
Thank you.
Anything else? Nick?
So priority number 4 is developing a school district safety plan, which will prioritize any needed improvements. You can see in the December update, it references actually something that Dr. Allen just talked about, and that was the climate and culture survey. And you can see that from our families and from our students and from our staff, great scores, well into the 90% about feeling safe in our environments. The other update or other piece of information that's in there is the response from the survey that was done by Excellence K-12, where our families graded safety of students as one of the highest areas. The only thing that was higher was quality of our school facilities at a 4.68 out of 5-point scale. So you can see even our families in that survey reinforce what was stated in the climate and culture survey, excellent scores for the safety and security of our schools. And then, as you guys are aware, we talked about it earlier, and as you know, starting next Monday, we are bringing in a group from the Center for Safe Schools to conduct a school safety audit. They will be in our environment for 8 days, addressing or assessing every building and all of our schools, all of our ancillary buildings as well. They have a full team coming in, full schedule built out for everyone, and that will be a pretty lengthy audit, as well as eventually when they get it done, hopefully about 4 weeks later, by the end of January-ish, we will bring back to you the full audit report of what they find as far as what their recommendations and what their highlights are based off of the data that they use and what they find within our schools. So take any questions on that one if you have them. And the last priority, priority number 5, has to do with stuff that we have talked about at length tonight, and that is the proposed tax levy and the ballot measure to ask our patrons about putting a levy on their taxes and hopefully higher compensation for our teachers. So really, we're progressing along well with this. We've already brought forward a sample language. I know that will be discussed and finalized in the coming months. So really, this is just a kind of an update of what you have already discussed tonight.
Anything else for Nick? Thank you.
I also want to point out that we had, since we're kind of at the midpoint of the school year, we had each of the principals reflect on the progress of their building level improvement plans, which are all aligned to our CSIPs. And so the extra attached report, you didn't get a typical monthly report from the principals this year, so this month, so this was in lieu of that. And it was just for you to kind of see a broader picture. It's not necessarily directly part of our presentation, but I want to draw attention to it in case in your review of it in your board packet for tonight, if there were any questions or any aspects of it that we do need to have a conversation about.
Any other comments or questions on the CSIP? Takes us to the Finance Committee's minutes.
So our District Finance Committee met again on November 28th, and the minutes from that meeting are here. This is, you don't vote on these minutes. This is just a way to keep the whole board in the loop on the topics that the committees are talking about. So they will meet again in February is when they're expected to meet next time, February 6th.
Okay. Takes us to new business, the staff Christmas reception.
So on December 20th, we will have a 3-hour early release. We'll feed all of our students that day. I think everybody's having a sack lunch that day. Kind of helps move things along and makes cleanup a little bit easier. Not that our kitchen staff is getting off easy, because they are going to do some appetizers and desserts for us. We're going to pull everybody together at the high school from 11 to 2 that day, all of our staff, that is, and we'll do shifts. So as high school and middle school students are released, and before they're released, actually the bus drivers come in. So we'll serve our drivers, then middle school and high school folks all come in, and then an hour later the elementary and early childhood folks all come in. I guess early childhood, they come in as a group, probably somewhere in between there. But we made this shift once we completed our new band facility. We used to all squeeze in up on the stage in the theater. That was cozy. That was cozy. We all care about each other a great deal, but that was a little tight, and so we have nice big space. So school board members, if you're available for any of that time that day, just let Mrs. Clappin know. And we'll give you directions on where to park. It's a little tricky right now up there, and we just want to know whether or not to expect you and put the call out for you if you're having trouble making your way to the band room that day. So we're excited to do that for the staff.
I still feel like you're blaming Jared and I for not moving the line as quickly as we needed to.
Sorry.
You're holding that against us.
I'm sorry.
I feel like when we were serving, I dropped a lot of food too. It was just kind of a messy process, so I appreciate the change.
Okay, a little more casual.
Takes us to board policies.
So policy BBBA-1, board member qualifications. The main change, this comes from the state, is that school board candidates need to have lived in the school district for at least 1 year immediately preceding their election. So it's the only change to this policy. And although this is just the second read, when we had the first read last month, it was suggested that we bring this back as an action item. So you do not need to act on it tonight, but it's listed as an action item. If you choose to take action on it, if you want to talk about it some more, or you want us to follow up with anything, we can wait till January. But otherwise, we would entertain a motion to approve it.
You want to make the motion?
She did.
Okay, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? So it's passed. And then you want to mention the next one.
That's just for you guys.
Okay. Okay. Jason?
I make a motion that we adjourn and move into executive session as authorized by the provisions of Section 610-021, numbers 1, 3, and 13 of the revised statutes of Missouri.
Second.
Lance?
Yes.
Julie? Jason?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Sarah? We are in executive session. Thanks, everybody, for
Da-da-da-da.
hanging out with us.